It's good to see everybody this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now in the hands of our Assistant City Clerk.
This is the pre-meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, July 9th. We have approval of minutes of June 25th.
Any issues, anyone? Okay.
Appeals, we have requests for waivers of the noise ordinance at Lincoln Boulevard and 10th Street on July 13th from 1 p.m. until 7 p.m. Public hearings. Today is the public hearing to declare the structures at 727 Florida Street Extension, 2956 Pages Lane, 1002 Alba Street, and 2060 Webb Avenue public nuisances and ordering them demolished. Today is the public hearing to fix cost for demolition of the structures at 2559 Dome Street, 1957 Pleasant Avenue, 475 Ridge Road Street, 660 St. Anthony Street, 1157 Kentucky Street, 4400 Government Boulevard, and 7131 Second Street.
President. Thank you, Mr. President. For the, I had a question. 727 Florida Street Extension. I'm glad to see this. I get a lot of calls. When we tear down or demolish a property, do we also cut that grass in that particular area?
Just to follow up, Mr. President, yes, Mr. Penn, that is part of the scope. The overall scope is to be code compliant with Chapter 52, which does include high grass weeds. It'll be cut. The ground will be leveled and whatever is exposed. With a foundation, I think this may be in a foundation or it may be piers. I think it's a foundation. They'll backfill to make sure it's level, graded, and then put seed. Mr. President, I do have one other. The fixed cost, we had a question for 4400 Government Street. The amount, just want to remind everybody that this was a commercial site, two-story commercial building that was burned, and that's why the cost is a little bit higher than the rest.
Then I didn't get a chance to go by 660 St. Anthony Street yesterday. It says fixed costs. Has that property been torn down yet?
660 St. Anthony, that is correct. That building is gone. It was a small, not on the corner, but close to the corner, residential building that was collapsing. And yes, it's gone.
It is gone?
Yeah.
Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. Pastor Marvin Charles Lew Jr. Will invite the council to the 154th Southeast Alabama Regional Annual Conference. Resolutions held over. 01581, authorize agreement with Alabama Department of Transportation for 2024 TAP downtown Mobile sidewalk improvements. 08582 through 589 are approving award of item-based bid for medical oxygen and approving purchase orders to Best Price Services for mulching of Greenlock Road median, to Donahue Chevrolet for Chevrolet Silverado truck, to Environmental Systems Research Institute for subscription to ESRI Advantage for GIS, approving purchase order to Ingram Equipment Company for 3 knuckle boom assemblies, and approving purchase order to Samois Technology for security cameras, and to Shaw Contract Flooring Services for cruise terminal flooring replacement, and to UJ Chevrolet for wreck repair for Chevrolet Tahoe.
Mr. President.
Mr. Penn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a couple questions regarding when we make purchases for vehicles. Can you tell the process in doing that, like if to the public with other dealerships, if they want to be involved in this bidding process of getting these vehicles? A lot of times we see in the same dealerships. So I wanted to know, do the public understands the proper way of bidding for these vehicles?
We maintain a vendor list of bidders for these vehicles, for all vehicles. Okay, everybody's sitting one every time. Our local dealerships have decided not to respond. Many of them tell me they cannot get the vehicles. In the case of the one at Donahue, they looked up and had several trucks. Ward International did bid against this at a $10,000 higher price for the truck. the Tahoes that you see on the police units are bought off a state contract. And that's a limited source that we have on those. But we do put everything out to bid, and there's probably about 25 to 30 vendor names that we have that we send these things to every time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
09590 and 591 are transferring funds from capital project grant match port security to fiscal year 23 port security grant program, and from capital project grant match port security to grant fund project match holding account for fiscal year 24 port security grant. 09592 and 593 are transferring funds from capital project IT technical and infrastructure upgrades to grant fund project port security grant program, and from capital project IT and technical infrastructure upgrades to grant fund project grant match holding account. 25595, grant a permanent easement to Alabama Power to provide new underground service to 2442 North Ridge Road. 47596, consider waiving the vacation fee as a condition of the vacation of a portion of Service Road and city right-of-way located at Knollwood Drive and Medical Park Drive. Consent resolutions being introduced. 37598, 599, and 600 are recommending approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a restaurant retail liquor license to Ashland Midtown Pub on Old Shell Road, to the ABC Board for issuance of a restaurant retail liquor license to the Juicy Seafood on Airport Boulevard, and for issuance of a special events retail liquor license to Bottles Up Mobile on Cody Road North. 4601 through 4604 are declaring the structures at 727 Florida Street Extension, 2956 Pages Lane, 1002 Alba Street, and 2060 Webb Avenue public nuisances and ordering them demolished. 4605 through 611 are fixing costs for demolition of the structures at 2559 Dome Street, 1957 Pleasant Avenue, 475 Ridge Road Street, 660 St. Anthony Street, 1157 Kentucky Street, 4400 Government Boulevard, and 7131 2nd Street. 58612, assessed cost for removal of weeds, repeat weed lane group 74. 6613 through 616 are determining appropriations to the Boys and Girls Club, South Alabama, Inverness Subdivision Homeowners Association, Opportunities for Entertainers and Performing Arts, and Ridgefield Property Owners Association serve a public purpose and approve payment. Resolutions being introduced. 01617, authorized rights-of-way use agreement for Unity Fiber Gulf Co. 01618, authorized agreement with the University of South Alabama for hospital-based violence intervention program, $240,000. 03619, appoint Stephen McNair and Barja Wilson to the Architectural Review Board.
Hang on just a second right there.
Sure.
During the discussion of the new ARB, I think we said that when we got to the point in time that we had to reappoint, we wanted to make sure that we staggered them so that they fell out right. Did we take a look at that when we started the reappointment process? Because I think that Steve was on like several boards overlapping, and I think at the time we said we wanted him to drop off and stay on one board or the other. I can't remember all that in detail. I have to go back and look at the meeting again.
We did implement staggered appointments on the ARB. I cannot remember his appointment expiration on the MHDC. But we, for the purposes of the ARB, given the orientation and information introduction, we just wanted to maintain these two appointments to keep our work moving on projects that we see moving forward.
I got you. We just didn't want, if you remember, there was a huge concern about the ARB and the MHDC having an intermingling, and we wanted to clean that up. So at one point, I think that we need to hold true to what we said we're gonna do that. So,
Okay,
somebody needs to kind of take a look at it. I don't mind the appointment if they're both. Like I said before, it's both great appointments, but if we're gonna follow the rule, the law that sets it down, then we need to make some type of arrangement.
all right, well, I'll bring that to the MHDC's attention with regard to any upcoming appointments that may impact his role there.
I mean, you're still gonna be both involved, even if you're there or not, with the wealth of knowledge that is there. So that's an inevitable approach.
Yeah, and that's the reason for the reappointments. Thank you.
08620, approve purchase order to Power DMS for annual renewal of management software for MPD, $15,068.48. 08621, approve purchase order to Nixon Power Services for cover for emergency generator for MPD, $27,747. 54622, authorize closure of a portion of public road on Yester Oaks Drive, south of its intersection with Claridge Road South.
Mr. President, thank you. I'd like to give the council a brief statement of the history on this. This item I placed on the agenda at the overwhelming support of the Landfair Yester Oaks neighborhood. The situation is that there is an apartment complex, Yester Oaks Apartments, composed of hundreds of apartment units, which has two entrances. One that goes to Airport Boulevard and the other exits into the Landfair Yester Oaks community. When this arrangement was first approved by the city, there was a gate installed by the apartments to limit the traffic going into the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, there were several gates installed, and they were, after a period of time, they either broke or were demolished by people who didn't like them there or whatever. In any event, there stopped being one there, which increased the opportunity for cut-through traffic, people cutting, not non-residents of the apartments, cutting from Airport to gain access to Dauphin Street or the other way around. When I first took office 10 years ago, the residents of the Landfair Yester Oaks community named this as the biggest problem they had, all this traffic going through the neighborhood. By this time, the apartments had been sold by the local owners, and the apartments were owned by some big company up in Connecticut or something. I worked with them for a while trying to get them to install a gate back. And eventually they refused to do it. They didn't say yes, they didn't say no, but they never put the gate back up. The situation has become aggravated by the closure of McGregor Avenue. In February, I attended a meeting of the neighborhood. There were about 100 residents there, and they had a lot of complaints about speeding, accidents. What happens if you're coming out of the apartments and want to gain access to Dauphin Street? You come out, you got to take a right, then you got to take a left, then you got to take a left, then you got to take a right before you get to the intersection. So it's in the straight shot. There are a lot of turns. There's been speeding, there's been accidents, and this is a neighborhood where we have a lot of kids and a lot of older folks. As I said, I attended a neighborhood meeting back in February of this year, and the residents were angry and really put a lot of pressure on me to do something. So I contacted Director Lasky, because one of the problems has always been that the emergency personnel, particularly fire department, has to have two exits, two points of access to the apartments. And Director Lasky looked into it and determined that the city could put up a gate, which would deny access to everybody except emergency personnel. Now, my own personal belief is that the city should have never permitted an apartment complex with hundreds of units to use a neighborhood as an ingress and egress point. I think it's time to stop it. As I said, the situation has been aggravated by the closure of McGregor. This it's not only, there's a lot of cut through traffic going through the apartments. The gate would help the residents of the apartments also because I don't know if y'all have ever been through, that's a private drive, by the way. The road that goes through the apartments is a private road. It's not a public road, but it goes like this, and they're getting some speeding through there. Now, I asked how big is the problem? I asked traffic engineering to do a traffic count, which they did for a week in the late May and early June timeframe. And the weekdays averaged approximately 200 more cars than Saturday and Sunday. The average daily traffic was 865 northbound, that is coming out of the apartments through the neighborhood to gain access to the street, and 880 vehicles southbound. In other words, 1,700 cars a day using this little cut. The highest hour of volumes was northbound at 7 to 8 a.m. and evening peaks were southbound from 3 to 7. Each of those hours averaged around 95 cars. As I said, the road through the apartments is a private road. This resolution would close that road, access only public, only to police and fire department. The residents could use Airport Boulevard exit to come in and go out. Airport Boulevard is a much better structured roadway for them to use going in and out of the apartments than going through the neighborhood. I expect that we will have some, in fact, I know that we will have some folks to speak at the meeting at 10:30. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anything else?
Mr. President,
Mr. Penn?
I understand Joe's concern. I talked to Rob about a situation in my particular area, in District 1, Sierra Vista, Street, with putting a gate. So of course I support whatever Joe desires to see the best for his district. But I want to make sure that we, get this done in my particular area as well. There was a gate there, and it's already a dead end street. So I'm just requesting from the administration to look in that so we can do the same in District 1. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, also, may I state that if we do this, then we're setting a precedent, because also in District 2, we had requests from one primary, John Carlton, of closing off residential street 2 to prevent traffic from going through there, because there was once a gate at that street too. So let us be mindful of the precedents that we're about to start when we start closing off streets again because of what is predeemed to be traffic. The other question I had though is, I didn't see the calculations for the traffic study, but I wonder, out of that 18 or 1,600 people that were going down that street every day, how many of them were actual double flow from the apartment complex? And then did we track the car from the airport entrance through the back entrance of Yester Oak, just to make sure that we were counting a true total traffic flow, and also not residents coming and going during the day, either south or northbound too? That's just a question I had based on the total number, because that seemed awful high, just be cutting through a parking lot, or cutting what I call a parking lot through a traffic complex. I don't mind any council member representing their district to get the best for their district, but just remember, this is a precedent that we're about to set based on what others have already asked throughout the city, where we've actually said no.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. Woods and Mr. Penn.
I know something like this has kind of been posed to me for a couple areas of my district. I did want to point out, like Councilmember Daves did, I'm not in favor of building walls and dividing neighborhoods and doing things like that. But this is not accomplishing that. This is not doing that. And I think the point of this is this is a public street maintained by the city of Mobile, dumping into a private street or a private drive, and as Councilmember Carroll said, basically a parking lot. So that's to me, that's I'll be voting in favor of this. That's the differentiating point, is this is public going into private. Probably should have never ever been. Access should have been reconfigured initially, but I just want to point that out, because I do know there's been requests from my area dividing or trying to provide barriers in different situations. But this is totally different. This is private or public going into private. So I just wanted to point that out.
I want to join in with Councilman Woods. I agree with that statement. And for my particular area, the difference is already a dead end street. We've been having break-ins on that particular area because it's walkable, and people are cutting through from the dead end. So the gate just would provide a safety, which was there before. So it's a little different situation.
Ms. Gregory and Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I think we have to look at these things issue by issue and not a blanket look at all of them because they all have certain characteristics. And Jill, didn't you say that there had been gates there before? So they had been approved at one time. And I think what the residents are asking for is just to have it.
The apartments. had
You put the
installed.
apartments, but a gate there again, just to calm some of that down.
Yeah. And I would just like to stress once again, the unique nature of this request in that what we have here, as I said, is apartment complex with hundreds of units in it. And emptying into a neighborhood. I think that's not a situation that replicates itself very often in the city of Mobile and should never have been allowed to happen, in my view. Thank you. All right.
I join Councilman Gregory that we have to look at this case by case because as I reminded Councilman Gregory, the council had visited this a couple of years ago. And believe it or not, your predecessor was very against blocking streets, and again, that was your predecessor. But again, as Councilman Carroll had also stated too, that people have been asking for this, across the city, but we had to be very careful because we had told people no in the past and everything. So again, this had to be a case by case, but with Mr. Daves, I've been on ever since I was a little boy by taking those little cut throughs, through airport to get to Dolphin Street, but especially since you have an issue with McGregory Street right now, that's an emergency factor to me. It's a public safety factor anyway. Okay. Madam Clerk.
01624, authorized agreement with the Helios Alliance for consulting services, $154,000.
Mr. President,
Mr.
I would like more information on this one from the administration.
Sure, and we have representatives from Helios here. They can tell you more about the intricacies if you'd like. But what you're looking at is an agreement dealing with our opioid settlement. And that's approximately the $2 million that has been set aside for both education and abatement. And so what we would do is we would contract with Helios Professional Services so they could go through and give us a recommendation of what the highest and best use for these funds would be. So a vetting process, an application process, and then giving us a recommendation. We don't have that kind of internal expertise, so we had to go outside to get it.
Mr. President. Mr. Woods.
Mr. Woods, the Helios has experience doing this other places. I think they've I guess dispersed settlements as far as this. Tennessee, I believe, does that come to mind?
And it'd probably be best for them to tell you more what their effort is if one of y'all want to come forward. Rayford.
Sure. Good morning. Excuse me, I'm Rayford Etherton, and we formed the Helios Alliance about a year ago. In Mobile, we brought together a group of leaders from across the country to try to, with the basic core approach here, is to use a technology that allows us to build simulation models to help understand, first of all, how and why the opioid crisis developed over time. We were hired by the attorneys who represented the city of Mobile back when you got involved in the opioid litigation. And we worked on the litigation side of it starting in late 2017. And that's been pretty much a daily experience for us since then. And about a year ago, as we saw the settlement funds starting to be distributed across the country and seeing how some of the things that were happening were not necessarily best practices, we decided to take our experience and make it forward facing so that we could help decision makers like yourselves predict impacts before spending any money. In layman's terms, to predict winners and losers before you have to make a funding decision. We have worked with the state of New Mexico, the state of Nevada, the state of Texas. We've done work for the Mobile County Board of Health. Starting about a year ago, we had the first Coastal Alabama Opioid Summit, and we went to the Porch Creek Indians and asked them to be the funding's anchor sponsor for a statewide simulation platform that could be used for Alabama. They did that. Since then, we've gotten a substantial grant from the Alabama Veterans Association to take into account, their nuances in terms of the general population. So that's the idea. And what we would do here is Mobile has been recognized on a national basis for the team that we've put together here. We've gotten really good press as being a leader to try to be transparent, to use evidence, to use data to support these decisions. So I have any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Penn?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you so much for coming. A couple questions. I guess in this particular role, have you done something like this before? I heard about the grants, all the different aspects, but have you ever done for city or state recommendations on how to utilize these funds? And what will be I know you spoken about grant opportunities. Would that be something that we can utilize? Will you be utilized to assist in that area as well?
We have built, what our work has done is to focus on the hows and whys of the opioid crisis. We put together, we have a one-pager like that. We have 4 buckets, is what we call them, of what we consider to be the best abatement practices. We work with a person who's generally considered to be the best abatement expert in the country. The University of Tennessee, Dr. Steve Lloyd, who's actually serves as the chair of the Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council. He's the medical officer now for Vets Recover here in Mobile. He spends a lot of time here. And so what we do is we take those four buckets, prevention, education, what we call survival programs, and then communication and coordination. And our model, we take those into account and simulate which policies, practices, or combinations are most likely to have the impacts. And then because of the approach during the performance of what we do, we can feed the results back into the model so we can actually measure outcomes. And when I say measure, I mean with real data and with real evidence.
Vice President?
Once you all go through all of the process, then how do we use that information going forward? Are you going to make recommendations on groups?
Yes.
Okay.
We would develop the process and the protocols that are out there about putting out RFPs and identify what the gaps are now, so that we can be targeted about that. And then we would evaluate, using our model, we would evaluate those proposals and we would make recommendations to you.
Oh, okay.
And then we are allowed to, then we can measure as we go forward.
And no doubt some of the groups that apply or answer to the RFP will be organizations that we already as a city fund, but I wouldn't want their city funding to necessarily keep them from also receiving opioid funding, because that's a specific.
That's exactly right. And it ought to be added on to what they currently do. Yes, right. Yeah, correct.
Mr. Carroll?
Forgive me if my linear thinking isn't correct this morning, but in those 10 paragraphs that you just spoke, are you saying that this is the beginning of the process to set up a program that will determine who will receive funding?
That for you to determine who receives funds, yes.
For us to determine?
Yes. Well, we would be supporting your efforts. We would come to you based on the evidence, the data, the proposals, the needs, and make recommendations to the council on how the funds should be deployed. But that would be your.
Would that
decision.
be based on someone submitting a proposal
Yes.
or request?
Yes. That's what I meant by RFP. So that we would put that out so that everybody has a fair shot. Everybody plays by the same rules. Everybody is on a going forward basis.
So when would your RFP go out?
As soon as we can reasonably get it done. That'd be a very high priority. So as soon as the contract, if the contract is approved, we would start working on that immediately. And I talked with Ricardo that we would try to get something to the public within a matter of weeks, not a matter of months.
Okay. The only thing I guess once we get to that point, I think that we need to, based on what I'm hearing, and I don't live in that world, so the language is a little bit different. But based on what I'm hearing, I think that we need to make sure that we have a proper advertising program to make sure that we get the information out to everybody that needs to hear it. Because it may be some people out there that, like I said, the language in the vernacular may be just a little bit different than what they're used to hearing.
Yeah, that'll be a big part of what we do, would be that communications piece of it, to explain to people what the process is and what the needs are, and then what the guidelines would be on submitting an application.
Mr. President.
What?
And just a little further, kind of just elaborating a little bit more on Mr. Carroll. Your 4 buckets, that's kind of basically your 4 methods of attack per se.
Yes, that's right.
This. And then based on the data that we have existing, you'll feed that data into your model. Your model spit out based on whatever percentage or amount of money we want to spend on this. It'll say that you need to put more effort here, more effort here. And then at that point, that's where people will submit RFPs. You'll take a look at the program, say this actually fits this bucket or this doesn't fit a bucket, or and then from that point, I guess the decision will come back to the city. We'll fund the programs of methods of attack based on the percentages, and then your real-time data comes into play when, as the programs start executing, then you can take a look and feed the data back in and say, we either need to do a little bit more effort here or a little less effort here. That's basically kind
That's
of
a very good explanation. So,
Anyone else?
Mr. President.
Mr. Penn?
Last question on the consulting service, the amount, would that come out the opioid funds?
Yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I have an item that I'd like to add. I've given it to Lana. It's transferring a road that's within the Linksman Golf Course over to the county for them to, take over essentially. They're building a whole new road coming through there. So I've got a resolution I'd like to add today with your approval.
It's a city road.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know, all right?
Is it inside the city limits?
Oh, yeah.
We bring those to the council every week.
Yeah. So anyways, I'd like to add that without
They've
objection.
agreed to that?
Oh, yeah.
Also, I would like to go back and visit 01-618. As Mr. Lasky or Mr. Woods, can y'all give us an overview of this particular item here?
Good morning, Mr. President. Yes, this is the hospital-based intervention program. We discussed it back in January as one of our programs that we were going to go forward with. We are also prepared to have Dr. Williams at the public safety meeting at 1 o'clock to discuss it further. Basically, in a nutshell, the hospital program is we attack the problem when the victim comes in to the hospital being gunshot or stab wound. Statistics will tell us that at 5 years after somebody is shot or stabbed, they have a 40% chance of returning in the next 5 years with a similar type of injury, and a 25% chance of dying in the next 5 years with a similar injury. What we do is we give wraparound services to the victim when they come to the hospital, and in order to try to prevent the cycle of violence, retaliation, things of that nature. Like I said, we can go through it a lot more in depth during the public safety meeting, but that's generally speaking, that's what it is.
Vice President.
I remember, I think it was Dr. Williams speaking at the public safety community meeting that Councilman Penn hosted back, I guess it was in January timeframe somewhere. Been a while. But I thought then that that was a good program and certainly a good way to try to intervene in what could be just a continuation of the same events happening to, to the folks who were in the hospital at the same time. Speaking of our Public Safety Committee meeting this afternoon, it has been advertised as only on the noise ordinance, the amendment for the noise ordinance, not to speak to the hospital-based intervention program.
Okay.
But I suppose if anybody has any questions at that point, we can certainly ask them. Yeah. I am. Which is why I was saying that. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Mr. President, at the request of the special counsel, we would like to add a subpoena authorization to the agenda today. I've already given it to the clerk's office, and we would ask that you suspend the rules and take that up by unanimously today.
Would that go under resolutions and then we just waive the rules on that one?
Resolutions and waive the rules, yes.
Okay.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Call for public hearings, 41-623, call for public hearing to consider modification of a previously approved plan unit development located at 5800 Southland Drive, scheduled for August 13th. Announcements.
Counsel,
Mr. President,
Ms. Wood.
I'm going back to the subpoena, Mr. Linder. Who would that be for?
And I apologize, Councilman Woods. This was an emergent situation this morning. The subpoena would be for Kevin Levy. By email correspondence time stamped at 5:10 p.m. yesterday, his private counsel declined to provide testimony and materials to the special counsel. We are coming up on our deadlines on this. We hope that this can all be solved by cooperation. The city is still cooperating fully, but by private counsel for Mr. Levy or Commander Levy, he declined to cooperate further, and we just the special counsel would like to have this in his bag of tricks, as it were, there in case it's needed.
And who's his private counsel?
That would be Mr. Chris Callahan.
And our special counsel's in communication with Mr. Callahan?
Yes, they've been negotiating. In fact, the subpoena authorization just asks for documents and testimony related that were detailed in very explicit detail by a letter dated July 2nd. That would have been exactly a week ago. And like I said, we only got the letter declining to cooperate at 5:10 p.m. yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
Just so we have full clarity on that, the city is cooperating. Mr. Levy, Commander Levy, has testified once. This is supplemental. So he fully came in and testified under oath, just like the other witnesses. But this is follow-up information that the special counsel is asking for.
That is correct. This is limited only to the stuff that was to the matters that were given to counsel for Mr. Levy or Commander Levy in writing a week ago, in which, like I said, they declined to provide anything further by letter yesterday.
Anything else from this council?
Just a reminder about the committee meeting.
Okay. And again, we got the committee meeting this afternoon at 1:00 p.m. On the noise ordinance. Anything from the administration? Okay. We see each other at 10:30.
Remember, see that? Why are we calling it entitlement committee? The name entitlement was it before?
Because it was basically CDBG at the time. And it just,
What was the word entitlement?